Hello, everyone. Catherine Mattice here with Civility Partners. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Happy to have you here with me today, as well as my guest, Steve Smith. Steve is a business coach with Growth Source Coaching, and Steve specializes in helping business professionals become extraordinary leaders, savvy business owners, and confident marketing strategists. So all business owners can use those three skills for sure. And it says you were considered a catalyst for change by the California Business Journal. So I'd love to hear more about that. And he's been working with over 500 business professionals around the world as he's been doing coaching. And he also co-hosts a podcast called The Business Wingman that airs every Tuesday at 4. And I've been on his podcast, so make sure you go over there. If you don't get enough of us today, you can go listen to our episode over on his website. So thanks for being here with me today, Steve. Much appreciated.
Catherine, thanks for having me. I'm going to enjoy this.
We always have fun. So talk to me about this catalyst for change. You were considered that in the Business Journal, and that's kind of a title you've given yourself. So tell me more about that.
Well, as the bio stated, I didn't come up with this. And in fact, I had never really been thinking of that. And many years ago, a guy that I met in one of my other networking organizations was the CEO of this online business publication called the California Business Journal, Rick Weinberg. And so he said, look, let's sit down and let's do an article on you and your coaching process and how your clients have benefited. And I said, sure. And it was a little more elaborate than I had expected. You know, he not only interviewed me, but he interviewed a number of my clients to get that third-party perspective. And when they came back, they just said, this is what everybody's saying about you, that, you know, inherently people know what they need to do differently. You know, they over time, it becomes obvious to many people. The problem is that subtle word change that tends to get in the way. And it just prevents a lot of people from ever going forward. You know, you come up with a million excuses why you don't really need to do that. You can just stay where you are and things will get better. Mm-hmm. And so he said, you know, as we were talking to several of your clients, what we realized was the fact that you worked with them was what enabled them to take that leap and to do the things that they weren't prepared to do in order to get a better outcome. And so they were the ones that kind of stuck me with that. And I thought, you know what, sounds great to me. I'm just going to run with it.
Well, that's why business owners seek you out. They need change. They recognize they need change, and they just don't know how to go about making that change. So it sounds like a great title.
Well, and as I've researched that whole behavioral phenomenon of change, what I've run into is that it's probably one of the most difficult things that the average person experiences. You know, you hear a lot about people that having this fear of public speaking, and that's true. It's a big fear. It's probably right up there with spiders and other creepy stuff like that. But the average person doesn't ever really think about public speaking. You know, you have to be in a certain kind of a career or type of business where that just makes sense. But pretty much everybody all the time experiences that demand for change because everybody around us feels compelled to tell us what we should do differently to be better. So you're always having that word foisted on you, either directly or indirectly. And most people think about it, and the first thing that comes up is not how much better can I be, but what am I going to lose if I do it?
Would you say that's the? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's what keeps people running in place many times.
Would you say that that's kind of the number one psychological fear that drives the fear of change, the fear of what I'll lose? I mean, why are we so afraid of change?
Well, because regardless of our predicament, our circumstances that we're living in, it's a known quantity. It's a controllable element. We may not like the outcome that we get every day or whenever we're trying to put our best foot forward and accomplish things, but it's something that we kind of have an idea of what's coming. So that kind of allows us to stay where we are. Change is a disruptor. It means there's a potential of losing control because now you're going to have to go from the known to the unknown. And because the lion's share of people today, and I think this is human nature that's been going on for a long time, we're much more predisposed to looking at negative outcomes than we are positive outcomes. So the negative outcome of losing control is what am I going to lose as a result of doing this?
Yeah, I talk about that even with my, culture change initiatives, that even though we all know that this culture is horrible and everybody hates it, that the idea of changing it is still very scary, because at the very least, when you come to work, you know what to expect, versus if we go through even a positive change, it's scary. And I guess that's true in anything. You buy a bigger house, or a house in a better neighborhood, or get a better job that you've always been looking for. It's still scary. And there's a lot of fear there just because of the unknown. How do you help business owners overcome that fear of change?
Well, as I have worked with all of these folks over the last 13 years, and I actually started coaching before I opened up my own firm. I was actually part of a very small startup franchise, and I love their model. I love their whole ideology towards how you produce the best coaching outcome. They were very, very young in the business, and they were really young in the franchising world, and they didn't survive, So I kind of graduated from them and kind of went on my own way. But the founder was really, really well steeped in neuroscience. And so all of us got a very, very in-depth, kind of a crash course in understanding how the brain works and what you have to do in order to make it your friend as opposed to your foe. And what I realized from that in working with all these folks is every day we're constantly being told or insinuated that if we do something different, we get a better outcome. And it comes from all walks. It comes from the professional side, our inner circle, our doctors, attorneys, CPAs. It comes from the personal side, our spouses, our kids sometimes, or from people in the workplace. Most of the time we hear it so much, we just build up this natural resistance of, I don't really need that, okay? They're telling me that because there's some self-serving reason why they're saying it. But really, for me, the best thing is to have everybody else around me change. Why should I change?
Right.
So when they get into this role of working with a coach with me, they've kind of come to that realization that, all right, things aren't working the way I want, but I really don't know what to do about that. What they're looking for is a magic bullet. Do this, they do it once, everything's great. Doesn't work that way. That doesn't work that way. So what I realized over time was the thing that causes people to actually embrace change is when they own it. When they recognize the benefit of them doing it to themselves, they own the desire. Now it's just a matter of selecting from the best options and then having a plan in place to keep you on track long enough to go from getting over the hump to being in maintenance mode. And you know yourself that if you've ever run into people who they've carried like way too much weight for most of their lives, and all of a sudden one day they wake up and say, I'm not putting up with this anymore. And over a period of 6 months to a year, they drop 80 pounds. Or people that are living unhealthy lives, and all of a sudden one day the doctor says, look, if you don't change, you got 6 months to live. It's your choice. And it's like, ooh, dude, I gotta do something about it. So they take on this, I have to own this. And then and some, you hear about the people that are reformed smokers that actually become zealots after that. They want everybody else to stop smoking because they buy into it so much.
Right.
So I created this process that I call the out-of-body experience. And for people in coaching and psychiatry over the years, it's basically called the third chair. So if you're talking with someone and I'll say, okay, if we had this person that you value in your organization on the line with us, and I asked this about them, what do you think they would say? Now, what's interesting about that is even though they know exactly where I'm going with that question, the mind, it kind of gets tricked into automatically thinking, okay, I've got to think about how this person thinks and acts in order to answer that. And you'd be amazed when people start talking on behalf of other people they know, how all of a sudden clarity leaks into the conversation. Now, all of a sudden, it's like dreams. Sometimes you dream like you're in it, you're figuring out what to do. And other times you're dreaming about yourself, kind of looking down and seeing what's happening, what's playing out with you. Like, that's what my attempt is, to get them out of their heads long enough to look at them objectively through the eyes of others and be able to make those assessments. And it's not something that happens first time every time, but over a period of time, I'm amazed at how people will come back and say, I've been thinking about what we talked about, and I asked other people, and guess what? Everybody else is saying the same thing. So all of a sudden now it's, gee, everybody sees what I don't see. If I see it, now I can own it.
Right. Okay, so that's the out-of-body experience, this technique you use of asking people to consider what others might say. And then it sounds like that often inspires them to then go ask other people what they might say. And
it's usually not the conversation we have in the moment. It's what they do with it after we get off the call.
Right.
Because most people, when they start thinking about it in that third-party venue, that objective view, they get off the call, they're still thinking about it. And they're like, all right, I got to figure this out.
Yeah.
Which is what you want. You want them to take ownership and develop the solution for their problem. I could tell them, but then I would be like the hundreds of people they run into every week and month that are telling them, and they're resisting it.
Right. My opinion is, you get lots of opinions from people for sure. Right. It's interesting. I coach people who engage in aggressive or abrasive behavior. And just as you're talking, I was thinking about that, because that's what I do. I do a 360. And it's kind of that same process. Well, let's look at what everybody else would say about your behavior, because I know you've got your own narrative about it. But what's
interesting with 360s? What's interesting with 360s, I do those as well, but over the years, I've kind of modified them. So if a company wants me to do a 360, the only way I will engage in that is if the recipient of that information agrees to have a series of coaching sessions that follow it. Because most of the time you have to have somebody help you digest what's coming back, and then just say, okay, what does that mean to you? What should you be doing with this? Sometimes you decide to do nothing. Hopefully you'll decide to do something. But then after they come to that decision point of, I want to do something about this, they're still stuck. They don't necessarily know where to go. They just realize now that there's something going on that everybody else knows about. Nobody's told them. Even though they have told them, they just haven't listened.
Right. Exactly. I hear that all the time. I wish the company hadn't let it get so bad. I didn't know it was so bad. I'm like, well, I'm hearing that people did tell you, or even somebody quit over it or what have you. Yeah. And that's the coach's role, is to then say, okay, well, let's look at some strategies for overcoming this. Awesome. So I know there's a lot of blind spots that all business owners have. And then I feel like maybe with COVID and everything we've been through, maybe there's even more blind spots. I'm curious to hear, what are some of the blind spots that you see business owners have? Like, what are the top 3 maybe?
All right. So this is interesting, because a number of years ago, as a result of seeing so much of this, I actually wrote an ebook, and it's on my website, and it's free. You can download it. That talks about the top 10 blind spots, that I've witnessed. I mean, they're anecdotal because they're all based on my own interactions. But here's a couple that are really, I think, detrimental to most organizations from a cultural and a performance output standpoint, all right? Okay. One is that you have an owner who has really never embraced the role of being the owner. They still like to be the head technician. They still like to be the one that knows all about the primary product or service the company's in business to offer. So they never rise above that and get into more of a leadership visionary, role that says, gee, we're here today, but where are we going? Are we in the right lane of the highway? Are we fulfilling our promise to our customers the best possible way we can? They don't think enough about that to help steer the ship. Everybody on the team kind of focused on why we're here, what we're trying to do, what kind of relationship and reputation do we want to have in the marketplace. So they kind of obfuscate all that, because it's all airy-fairy, let's just worry about getting the job done. Well, that's for supervisors and managers and people downstream that are more closely, kind of hooked to the daily activity. Somebody needs to be up top looking over the trees saying, where are we going with all this?
Right, right.
They're right in front of us that we're not looking at, that could deep six us and put us out of business quickly. So that's a huge blind spot that I find a lot of people, just they don't pay any attention to. Another one, and I think this is becoming a little more noticeable for folks, but I still see it going on in a lot of areas, are people in leadership roles, and again, predominantly owners, but it could be executive level folks, dismissing, avoiding, or just somehow downplaying bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have somebody in the ranks that's
I can
extraordinary.
attest to that.
It could be a salesperson that's just kicks butt.
Mm-hmm.
That the company realizes they could not do well without this one person on the team. And this person has decided that they're going to show up and just do whatever they want, regardless of how offensive or off-putting or disruptive they might be. So the company puts up with it because addressing it might cause loss. There we go again with that loss thing.
Right.
And so the company loses because they've held somebody accountable to better codes of conduct.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of thing can happen, and that's what causes cultures to become fractured. You know this, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be the person at the top with the bad behavior. It's the people at the top that know there's people down there just disrupting the heck out of everything and just deciding they're not going to do anything about it.
Yep. And then nobody trusts the leaders because they can see that the leaders are discounting it. And then they decide, well, hey, if I'm a good performer, I can be a abrasive or disruptive person too. And yeah, then it all goes downhill from there.
Right. So that's number two. The third one has to do with, again, the whole idea of the business owner kind of pulling themselves up and out of the daily routine, the weeds, the minutia, a lot of things that go on. And sometimes they actually want it. I get quite a few people say, look, I would love to not to be able to deal with this all the time, but I just feel like if I don't, the business is going to unravel. And so what it boils down to is, number one, they don't know how to delegate effectively. And that's a legitimate area of training that needs to happen. But what causes that is mentally, they've already come to the conclusion that nobody can do it as well as them. Mm-hmm. So why spend all the extra time delegating when I can just do it right the first time?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And what I've realized over time, and this happened way before I got into coaching, I spent 30 years in consumer products manufacturing, working for General Mills and Lysol Chemical. And I mean, we're talking top-notch organizations. All right. And the first thing you learn when you get into those upper levels of management is that there's people below you that if you give them a chance can actually do it better than you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the minute you learn to kind of like put your ego in your hip pocket and kind of move out of the way, you can actually have people bring your organization to really, really peak levels of performance if you just allow it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But in the small business community, you have a lot of folks that, look, it's their baby. They might have started it. Somehow they were responsible for getting to where it is. And so there's this mindset that, gee, I can bring other high-powered people in and I'm paying a lot of money to fill roles. But now that they're on the inside, I'm not going to let them do what they do best.
Right. I have a question for you. So 1 and 3 feel kind of related, that you have a hard time letting go and delegating, and also that you're still kind of in the business instead of being the visionary. How do you talk a business owner into recognizing that while you may have the most billable hours or you may be the top producer, it's actually harming your business? I mean, obviously a business owner is going to be looking at the ROI. So if you tell a business owner, you should be the visionary and let someone else do all of that billable hour work or whatever it is. And they say, well, I'm the one who makes most of the money. I mean, how do you help them navigate that whole thought?
And I have clients right now that are in the throes of kind of moving down that road. But many times what I'll ask them is say, look, let's just put all the daily ops aside for a moment. Tell me where you see this business going and what's most important to you as you move down the road, because everybody gets to an age where we're either not capable or just don't want to do it anymore. So that's where you offload. And hopefully if you want the business to out-survive you, you've got to have people and a plan in place to take it on. Mm-hmm. So I help them get really, really clear about what that down the road importance looks like. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people don't think about that. It's so far off. Okay, we have too many things today to worry about. I can't afford to spend any time thinking about that. Right. So we force them into thinking about that. And then the next one, which is really, this is the linchpin, all right? How much is your time worth?
Right.
Because look, there's a lot of things you're engaged in that you could pay somebody $20 an hour to do. Is that what your time's worth?
Right.
Or are you more valuable to your organization than that? And what I call it is kind of aligning yourself with your role. If this is the role you're in, are you living that role? If you're not, guess what? Everybody around you is seeing that. And so over time, that gives them permission to not live their role. So they've got a whole different problem.
Right.
So let's take a look at what's the highest and best use. You know, it's a real estate term, right? For undeveloped land, what's the highest and best use? So I model that to them. What's the highest and best use of your time? If I could show you how to run your business 3 days a week and get the exact same outcome you're getting now, you have any interest in that? I haven't had anybody today say no to that.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a specific client who is so in the weeds that then everybody else is so in the weeds. And I've been pulling them. I feel like everybody's hanging on a rope and I'm pulling them, you know, over the line one by one to like, come onto the leadership side. Yeah, that's interesting. I might have to put you in touch with that client actually. Do you feel like with COVID and coming out of it, I mean, I've been talking about the fact that, you know, hey, now's a chance to sort of rebuild and almost kind of start over. Whatever you didn't like about your business before, we're kind of going into this new phase. I'm just curious if you've seen any of that with your own clients where business owners, you know, it's a chance to kind of rebirth, you know?
Right. Well, okay, so here's my theory, all right? And I have a lot of theories and a lot of them aren't worth anything, but this one seems to match up with what's going on. Last year, February, March, that kind of time when everybody started really becoming, well, gee, this is a real problem, right? You know, it's starting to work its way from the other side of the earth to us. And so we were all of a sudden just violently thrown into this alternative universe, you know? Got to shut down. You can't leave your house. You got to wear a mask. You know, all of a sudden, the most precious item on the globe was toilet paper. You know, all of this kind of stuff just happened very quickly, and everybody was forced to have to deal with it.
Yep.
So a year later rolls around, and coming out of it has been much slower. There's been more steps. You know, vaccines started to become available, and numbers started to go down, and people started getting more comfortable with living the way we were forced to live a year ago. So coming out of it now has been more of a deliberative thought process for people in terms of how do I do this? Before you didn't have a choice; you just did it because that's where we were headed. Now you've got more of a choice about how you do it and who you do it with and how fast and all that other kind of stuff. And that's where I'm seeing people really having problems, because it's not, oh my God, I don't like this, but somebody told me to do it. Now I have to decide what I'm going to do with the conditions that are presented to me in front of me now.
Right.
And so when it comes to, you know, do you have people back at work? How do I continue to manage the ones that don't want to come? Well, the big one that's hitting now, which is interesting, is people are having a difficult time not only finding employees, but there's this rampant paranoia about how do I hold on to the ones I have? Because with that lack of employees that are experienced and skills being available, all of the recruiting industry is now poaching, which is fine. It's been going on for decades. But it's now kind of gotten to like, okay, if you want somebody really good, we're going to have to go out and steal them from XYZ company. And XYZ company is sitting there thinking, when am I going to lose my best person? And will I know when it happens? Right.
Yeah, we've been seeing that too with our clients. Lots of people leaving, and then there's all these articles that we're at the highest, you know, exit rates of all time. Everyone's sort of coming out of the fog, reevaluating, deciding to go somewhere else. And it makes it difficult to recruit because everyone's off looking for the best thing. And if you're not the best thing, then they may not come to you. So,
well, in my opinion, the downside of the whole remote work phenomenon, which again was a necessary component of navigating the virus, you know, through much of last year, the biggest downside that I'm not sure we completely fully embraced was that disassociation from the work culture that you signed up for when you went to work at that company. The longer you stay away from that, the more your mind starts telling you, I don't really have to have the certain decorum or the acumen or the things that were expected of me when I was in the workplace. Now I can work all day in my jammies if I want to do that.
Right.
And as people live there longer and get more comfortable with that, the idea of going back to more structure for some people, not all, is like, I don't really want to do that. It's like living in Southern California and saying, gee, do you want to go back on the 405 twice a day?
Yeah.
No.
Heck no.
But we all did. We all did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it'll work its way through, but I think we're all headed for having to manage a lot of disruption in the running of the business until all this kind of settles out. It's not over. It'll be going on for another 6 months or more.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear 5 years from now what people are saying about the way work changed. I have a LinkedIn learning course coming out soon around flexible work, and I talk a lot about what you're talking about, that a huge percent of employees will not go back to work unless they can get 2 or 3 days at home. And, they're just taking a stand. Lots of research that people will take a pay cut in order to have that flexible work. And we're just never going to go back to 100%. Everybody's at work all the time. And I think the sooner business owners recognize that, and then we've got to get good at how to maintain culture, because
even in that situation, what I'm working with people now is, because for years they managed employee output by simply watching what they were doing, because they could. They were across the aisle.
That's good. Yeah.
Right. But I could just watch them. Gee, if they're at their desk and there's paper everywhere and they're on there, okay, they must be working. But now you don't have that ability to see what they do. The only time you see them is if you're having a meeting, and with virtual backgrounds, people can be anywhere they want. You have no idea. So that makes business owners crazy, because they're like, I don't really know if they're working. Well, you know what? Everybody's going to have to get comfortable with the idea of managing results, not activity.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard change.
It's a coach's dream, right? Manage results. It doesn't really matter how long it takes.
Right.
I mean, that's really why we're all there, to get some sort of result. So, yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Well, I'll have you back in a couple years, and we can pontificate on all the stuff that happened and where we're going.
Right. How much of it was true, and how much did we find out, the rest of the story?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for being here with me today. Always love chatting with you. And tell us where everyone can get a hold of you.
The best thing for me to start would be just go to my website. It's growthsourcecoaching.com. And there's a ton of stuff there. I give away an enormous amount of information and resources for free. But you'll learn about me. You'll learn about how other businesses have benefited. And if you like the style, if you like kind of the engagement, you can fill out a little box, and we'll set up a time and we'll chat, and I'll help you figure out whether I'm the right person for you or not. That's probably the best place to start.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll make sure we get your website posted there in the chat comments. And again, thank you. Have a great rest of your day and week, and I'll talk to you soon.
Catherine, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.